Welcome to yet another exciting episode of Business Africa. If you're hungry for food or hungry for success, you'd love the stories we have for you today. I'm your host, Afolake Onyiloye. The top stories this week. African countries unite to build resilient food systems as the COVID-19 pandemic worsened the hunger situation on the continent. African cuisine is making headway in Europe as the street food festival in Lyon. African chefs entice European visitors. And finally, two rating agencies have affirmed Ghana's credit standings. Moody's rated Ghana's standings at B3, while Standard & Poor rated it at B-. Africa remains a net food importer, meaning that its food import bill is higher than its food export revenues. According to the State of Food Security and Nutrition in the World, 282 million people went hungry in Africa in 2020, and the COVID situation could worsen the hunger situation on the continent and globally. In the following story, we explore conversations on developing Africa's food systems. Take a look.
The COVID-19 pandemic exposed the fragility of Africa's food systems. According to the State of Food Security and Nutrition in the World, SOFI, 282 million people went hungry in Africa in 2020. That is about 23% of the continent's population. The number also represents a 12% increase compared to the continent's population, which was undernourished in 2019. The African Green Revolution Forum held in Nairobi, Kenya in August sought to find sustainable and strategic solutions to the threat of food insecurity on the continent. Inflation rose as high as 40% in May 2021 as commodity prices increased. Conflict and the economic stress that has been increased by the pandemic also mean that many households across the continent have become even more vulnerable. Yet, increased public expenditure and debt, analysts say, would mean that governments can do very little to support them. At the forum, attended by more than 8,000 delegates from 103 countries, delegates agreed that an integrated approach needs to be taken in order to achieve resilient food systems and to boost productivity of smaller, older firms, as opposed to increasing farmland at the expense of natural resources like forests.
Jennifer Ban, the new director of African Green Revolution Forum, joins us now from on that story. Now, the talk about challenges hindering sustainable food systems is not new. What needs to be done differently in order to get our food systems right?
Well, I think there are a couple of things that we have realized, right? One is the complexity of the matter, and that if we would like to address hunger and achieve zero hunger goals, we have to have a food system approach and really look at the multitude of challenges that are facing our farmers and our food value chains, not just focus on farm production, but focus also on balanced consumption, focus on the connectivity in the value chain, access to finance, on research, input, regulation, etc. I think it's that awareness that we really need more systemic approaches. That is number one. Number two, it's also the urgency. We have 9 seasons towards 2030. That is not a lot of time. There is a significant investment gap annually of multiple billions of dollars into the agriculture systems. So I think that is really what needs to change. We need to start co-designing from top to bottom and from bottom to top. We need to start co-creating and also co-implementing, aligning, and hold each other accountable. I think that is what is the new in the thinking that is emerging.
Now, why is it important for Africa to have a unified voice and strategy when it comes to food security, and how much consensus was achieved at the summit?
When it comes to the African continent specifically, part of the solutions of making our food systems more resilient lies in more regional integration, in alignment of policies, in alignment of standards. Think about the Africa Free Trade area, how important that will be for our smallholder farmers or SMEs, traders, etc. alike. So in that sense, it's critical that Africa has an elevated and coordinated voice globally. Now, how has the HRF contributed to that? In several ways. This is the year of the UN Food Systems Summit. We have invited 20 countries to share and reflect on their national food dialogues with a variety of stakeholders. We've had strong leadership, because leadership, change makers and championship on an individual level is also critical. We had leadership from His Excellency Kenyatta from Kenya, and he was joined by presidents and vice presidents of Rwanda, Namibia, Malawi, Uganda, and Tanzania as well. That leadership commitment was critical. And there are a couple of things that really came out of the HRF that all of these leaders mentioned. Number one is that we have to catalyze expansion in agriculture and food productivity. But as I said earlier, it has also focused on those technologies, resources, and approaches that will lead to intensification. And we have to focus specifically on smallholder farmers and women. We have to boost investment financing for Africa's food systems along the food value chain, not just in terms of access to inputs, but also how do we link to markets, how do we link to affordable food systems, and what infrastructures and business models do we have to put in place. We have to make sure that our consumers have access to safe, nutritious, and affordable food as well, because aligning our diets and being responsive to demographics such as urbanization and changing food patterns will be critical. But we also have to strengthen local and regional food markets. That's also one of the outcomes of the HRF. And lastly, we have to build resilience, both through social safety nets, early warning systems, and new technologies. So those are the main outcomes that all of the leaders rallied around.
Jennifer Ban, thanks so much for those insights. Still talking about food, but this time around about food tourism. African culinary art has found its way to the art of French food capital, Lyon. At this year's Street Food Festival, some 20 chefs from 5 African regions represented the continent, inciting and showing off the African culinary culture, a taste of what it feels like back home. Will the African stands incite the European visitors to the continent? Let's find out.
Defending the African culinary heritage. This is the objective of the chefs who took part in the Street Food Festival in Lyon, France. While the continent is often depicted in development discourse as food insecure, these chefs came to promote the richness of African cuisine as diverse, endowed, and contemporary. We need to relearn how to eat locally and therefore how to work locally. Here in France, I work in Lyon. We're very much into short circuits. We do locavore and all the chefs work on it. It's something that gives back to the terroir. This logic, we have to implement and appropriate it somewhere. It plays inevitably. As soon as we start to work on our products, we start to eat our products. So inevitably, we will work it, we will cultivate it. Producing what Africa consumes could answer the problem of food insecurity. To date, European countries sell food to Africa for about 18 billion euros per year, including cereals, milk and vegetable oils. For these leaders, cultural diversity can address the issue of food insecurity. In all of Black Africa, we eat peanuts, and each country has its own way of cooking them. Coming from Cameroon, there is a diversity of ways, from one region to another. Some go for very thick, others less thick, depending on the region. So here we are, we're getting out of here. We have a lot of products to present. Everyone knows that we cook very well, and moreover, we say that we're often hungry in Africa. But there are many things. We are rich. Africa is rich. Food is central to African heritage and identity. The festival organizers also hoped to include this in the ongoing debate about African prosperity and well-being. For this 5th edition, we remain faithful to our DNA, that is to say, the invitation to travel. We gathered several chefs. There are several destinations that we are invited to this year. Africa with so many chefs, Brussels, you see behind me Asia, so that's the essence of our festival. African countries import billions of dollars worth of food every year, a lot of which is available or can be grown on the continent.
Two credit rating agencies affirmed Ghana's credit ratings at B3 and B- respectively. Moody's and S&P credit rating agencies considered Ghana's improving growth prospects, resilient external sector performance, and continued access to the capital markets as essential factors in maintaining the rating and the outlook.
Ghana has recorded a positive credit rating from two leading agencies, namely the Moody's Investor Services at B3 and Standard & Poor at B-. The two agencies further acknowledged that Ghana's economy was recovering from the effect of the pandemic faster than its peers. Ghana's economy expanded by 3.9% in the second quarter of this year. During the same period last year, where COVID-19 had emerged, the gross domestic product growth rate was -5.7%. Ghana brought back and retired over $900 million worth of Eurobonds, which had reduced the external debt stock significantly. On the domestic front this year alone, an amount of $800 million had been used for domestic liability management, which involved the buyback of 3-year and 5-year bonds.
And that's all we had for you this week on Business Africa. I hope you've been inspired by all the food and positive news coming out of the continent. The news continues on our various platforms at Africanews and Africanews.com.